Every day, he leaves a flower at the door of an abandoned store, trying to ease the pain of the past. But when he finds a young woman hiding there, their lives change forever. Who is she? And what does this place really mean? In today's video, you'll uncover a heart-wrenching story of loss, secrets, and unexpected connections. A lonely man, seeking comfort in his daily gestures, finds a mysterious young woman hiding in the store he's visited for so long, a place filled with memories and interrupted dreams. What's her connection to this place? Why does this store mean so much to them both? Stay until the end to reveal what ties these two lives marked by pain and an unexpected fate.
The sky was gray and heavy, as if the weight of the world had settled in the clouds over the port of Bergen, Norway. Victor walked in silence, his firm steps echoing on the wet stones of the dock, which reflected the faint glow of dawn. He wore a thick coat, showing signs of wear and repair, a testament to the many winters he had endured. In one hand he held a delicate solitary flower, a stark contrast to the robust man who grasped it. This flower was a symbol of a tradition he had created, a silent and intimate gesture. Arriving in front of a small abandoned shop, which once exuded the aromas of fresh herbs and spices, Victor knelt down. Years ago, his wife Ingrid used to buy the seasonings she used to make warm soups on cold days. He placed the flower in front of the locked door, just as he had done countless times since she had passed. Closing his eyes, he murmured a prayer, words spoken softly that only he could hear, yet they seemed to penetrate the aged wood of the door, as if Ingrid could feel his presence. However, as he stood up, Victor felt an odd sensation of being watched. He furrowed his brow and looked around. His weary eyes scanned the narrow alley, but he saw no one. He knew every detail of that port and understood that at such an early hour he rarely encountered another soul. Yet the feeling persisted, unsettling. Something was different that morning. Victor stepped away, but his heart raced, his intuition telling him that the place held more than just his memories. The strange sensation of the encounter lingered with Victor throughout the day. His hard, weathered face reflected a concern that few would dare to question. By the end of his shift, as he gazed at the port enveloped in twilight, he returned to the shop, following the impulse that had troubled him since the morning. The place appeared even more desolate in the dim light, with the dusty display window serving as a reminder of what it once was. As he approached, Victor noticed a shadow moving behind the window. His heart raced. He looked through the glass, his penetrating gaze honed over years of facing storms and uncharted waters. Inside the darkened shop, the outline of a young woman became visible. She stood still, but her pale, frightened expression betrayed her tension. She wore tattered clothes, and her face bore the marks of exhaustion, which Victor recognized all too well. She watched him with a mix of distrust and fear. He moved closer, but upon sensing his motion, she recoiled, retreating into the shadows. Victor raised one hand, signaling that he meant no harm. "Hey, it's okay. I won't hurt you," he said, his voice a blend of firmness and warmth. But the young woman, with eyes that seemed to carry an inexplicable pain, continued to back away, caught between terror and hesitation. He sensed that she held a story locked away, and for reasons he couldn't understand, Victor felt a strong urge to protect her. Not knowing what else to do, he took a step back, respecting the distance she maintained. "I come here every day," he said softly. "If you need anything, I'm at the port." Victor didn't expect a response, but he noticed a slight change in her gaze, something that could have been a flicker of hope, or perhaps just a reflection of light. In that moment, Victor understood that the connection between them would be silent, built on small gestures and understood only by those who carried pains that words could not explain. The next day, Victor returned to the port before dawn. He carried a small basket filled with provisions, bread, an apple, and a bit of cheese. Hesitant, he left the basket in front of the shop's door, wondering if the young woman would find it. He also left a simple note, written in his rough handwriting. "So you won't feel hungry." Without another word, he turned and walked toward his boat. That afternoon, as he passed by the shop to see if the basket was still there, Victor noticed it had been taken. Looking around, he spotted something on the ground, a small piece of torn paper. Kneeling down, he picked it up and saw that it was written in a shaky, hesitant hand, containing just one word: "Thank you." Victor squeezed the paper tightly, feeling a wave of emotions he couldn't quite comprehend. Gratitude. She was accepting his help, even if in a discreet manner. In the days that followed, Victor maintained the ritual. He left small baskets and notes, always finding a sign that his aid was welcomed. The young woman never appeared, but he knew she was there, living a hidden and solitary life in the shadows of the shop. He wanted to know more about her, to uncover her story and understand what had brought her to that place. But he recognized that it was a matter of time and patience. Victor continued to observe the shop, growing increasingly intrigued, increasingly drawn to that mysterious presence. His own pain seemed smaller when he thought of her, and he was surprised by the new energy that began to emerge in his heart. Something was changing within him, as if his life, once desolate and marked by loss, was slowly being filled with a new purpose. The silent exchanges between Victor and the young woman forged a connection that he could not fully explain. Yet as the days slipped by, he began to feel that this relationship, built on silence and delicacy, was on the verge of evolving. With each unspoken meeting, each note left behind, Victor sensed that the young woman's story was intertwined with his own in a way he had yet to understand. What had brought her there? And where would this unexpected connection lead them? The next morning, Victor woke up before dawn feeling an unusual anxiety. It was a cold morning, and the port of Bergen was shrouded in a thick fog, muffling the sounds and making everything seem quieter. He put on his wool coat, grabbed a hot coffee and a paper cup on the way, and headed towards the abandoned shop where he left his daily offerings for the young woman he only knew by her wary gaze. Upon arrival, he noticed the marks of time on the building's facade, peeling paint, dusty windows, a reminder of what the place had once been in better days. Victor placed the hot coffee on the step and stepped back a few paces, waiting in the shadows to see if she would appear. For a moment, the morning chill felt more intense, penetrating his coat and reminding him of the solitude he had carried for the past few years. Before long, Astrid appeared with light, hesitant steps, almost as if she feared being seen. Her hair was carelessly tied back, and her worn clothes showed the signs of a difficult life. She paused, eyeing the coffee with some suspicion, but after a moment she extended her hand, gripping it carefully as if it were a rare and precious gift. Victor felt a quiet satisfaction seeing her accept the gesture. Seizing the opportunity, he slowly approached, sitting at a respectful distance. Astrid watched his every movement, ready to flee if she sensed any threat. Victor, with a discreet smile, began to speak. He told her about his wife Ingrid, a woman who loved to cook and brought life to the small port. He described how the shop used to be, filled with the aromas of fresh spices and seasonings. Each word seemed to echo in the cold morning air, filling the silence with palpable memories. Astrid remained silent, but Victor noticed her gaze softening. "I know what it's like to lose something we love," he said in a low voice. She averted her eyes for a moment, as if his words had touched something deep within, a wound still open. Victor realized that this young woman carried a pain he might never fully understand, but the empathy he felt was stronger than any curiosity. He knew that to build a bridge with her, he needed to wait and respect the time she needed to open up. The coffee was almost cold when Astrid finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, hoarse, almost a whisper. "I wasn't from here. I came a few months ago. Everything I had was destroyed." She hesitated, her eyes lost in the distance as if reliving something she would rather forget. Victor listened attentively, respecting every pause, every hesitation. He understood the weight of a painful memory and how careful one needed to be when bringing it to light. Astrid continued, her voice trembling. "My parents. We lived in a small town. Our house burned down during the night. I couldn't save them." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back, turning her gaze to the wet stones of the ground. Victor felt the impact of her words like a cold wave. He didn't need more details to comprehend the depth of that loss. He too knew the emptiness left by death and understood that nothing, absolutely nothing, could fill such a void. Astrid's story awakened memories long buried within him, memories he had avoided revisiting. He recalled the days following Ingrid's death, the sensation of an empty home, the nights when silence seemed to scream. Victor reached out his hand, hesitating, but soon withdrew it, respecting the distance she still maintained. Instead of words of comfort, he offered something more valuable, his calm and supportive presence. For a moment they sat in silence, side by side, watching the port. The world seemed to stand still, as if they shared an invisible pain that no one else could understand. Victor knew that it wasn't necessary to say anything. They had found each other, two souls marked by loss, seeking redemption in a silent gesture. Her pain was as real as his, and he understood that this connection was not a coincidence, but rather a destiny that had brought them together. The next morning, Victor decided to take a new step. While preparing a basket of provisions for Astrid, he added something special, an invitation. The note was short, with awkward but sincere handwriting. "If you'd like to accompany me to the market today, I would be happy. I need help with the fish." He hesitated before placing the note in the basket, wondering if it was too bold. But he knew there was something in Astrid that needed a spark, an opportunity to break the cycle of isolation. He left the basket in the usual spot and stepped back, anxious and a bit insecure. He wasn't sure if she would accept, but he was willing to try. As evening approached and Victor was about to give up on the idea, he saw a figure slowly approaching on the horizon of the port. It was her, with a cautious yet determined look. Astrid found him on the dock, and Victor noticed something different in her expression. Perhaps it was the way she stood, more upright, or the faint glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. As she accompanied him to the fish market, Astrid observed every detail of the environment, as if trying to understand the workings of a world she didn't know. Victor handed her an apron and taught her how to clean and organize the fish at the stall. She seemed hesitant at first, but over time, her movements grew more confident. Victor watched her in silence, noting the effort she made to absorb every instruction. For him, that moment was not just a lesson in work, but an act of mutual trust. As they worked side by side, Victor shared stories from his youth at sea, about the storms he had faced and the challenges of being a fisherman. Astrid listened intently, allowing herself to be drawn into those tales. She didn't smile, but Victor saw a hint of light in her eyes, something he had never imagined he would see. Finally, as the sun set over the port, Astrid paused for a moment, gazing at the horizon. "Thank you," she said softly, but with unexpected firmness. Victor knew in that instant that a new chapter was being written in her life. Seeing Astrid finally step out of the shadows and allow him to draw closer, Victor realized that this was just the beginning of something greater. But how far would this new connection take them? Could a broken soul like Astrid's find solace in the simplicity of the fish market?
Enjoying this heartfelt story? If so, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and leave a comment below. Your support is incredibly important for the growth of the channel and helps us bring you more stories like this one. Now let's continue with the story.
Astrid arrived early at the fish market, accompanying Victor as the city of Bergen slowly awakened. The sun had yet to fully rise, and a light mist hovered over the docks, making the atmosphere cold and damp. Dressed in a coat borrowed from Victor, which covered her from shoulders to knees, Astrid appeared hesitant, her cautious gaze suggesting she feared each step she took. It was a new experience for her, and her heart raced, a mix of anxiety and curiosity. The first customers began to arrive, casting curious glances at the young stranger beside Victor. Some men nodded in greeting, but Astrid remained silent, observing and trying to understand how the place operated. Victor, noticing her nervousness, handed her some nets and guided her to organize the fresh fish at the stall. "Take it slow," he explained patiently. She followed his instructions, her hands slightly trembling at first, but soon calming as she gained confidence. As the hours passed, Astrid felt a slight comfort in her work. Amid the chatter of voices and the sound of seagulls circling overhead, she began to feel part of something larger. Victor discreetly observed her face, noting a rare glimmer of serenity as she interacted with the customers. At one point, an elderly woman stopped at the stall and smiled at Astrid. "You have a kind face," the woman said, her smile seeming sincere. Astrid was taken aback by the comment, and, feeling a bit shy, returned the smile, warmth blooming in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. As the day progressed, she began to attract regular customers. Her gentle voice and attentive demeanor created a favorable impression, and for the first time in a long while, Astrid felt that perhaps she could belong somewhere. Victor watched everything with quiet joy, pleased to see Astrid's transformation and the positive effect she had on his business. For him, it was a rebirth, both for her and for himself. In the middle of the afternoon, the market was bustling, and Astrid, although still quiet, was starting to feel more at ease in her new routine. She was handing out packages of fresh fish, smiling slightly at customers, while Victor kept a watchful eye on every interaction. However, at one point, a tall man with a stern expression approached the stall. He scrutinized Astrid with a critical gaze, furrowing his brow as if questioning her presence there. Victor, sensing the tension, approached the man with a friendly smile, but the customer remained impassive. "Why is a stranger here, Victor?" the man asked, his tone oscillating between provocation and suspicion. "A person from outside taking care of your business? What happened to you?" Victor felt a twinge of irritation but remained calm. He knew that many in the market valued tradition and had difficulty accepting changes, especially when they involved someone like Astrid, whose story was unknown. "Astrid is helping because I invited her," he replied, firm yet polite. "She's good at what she does, and that's what matters." The man looked at Astrid again, now with a clear expression of disdain. She, noticing his gaze, lowered her head, feeling embarrassed. Victor felt a wave of protectiveness rising within him. Without a second thought, he stepped forward, placing himself between her and the customer, his face serious and determined. "Astrid is part of my business, and if you have a problem with that, maybe you should look for another stall." Victor's stance took everyone by surprise, including Astrid, who watched in silence. The customer muttered something incomprehensible and walked away, still casting reproachful looks. Astrid felt the weight of rejection, but also an unexpected strength from Victor's gesture. She knew he was risking a lot by defending her like that, and the act brought them closer together. For the first time, she felt truly supported, as if someone finally had the courage to protect her, regardless of the cost. By the end of the day, when the market had emptied and the sun began to set over the distant mountains, Victor and Astrid packed up the stall and tidied what remained. The words and disdainful look of the customer lingered in Astrid's mind, and Victor noticed her silence as they worked. He understood that no matter how strong she tried to appear, those interactions still affected her. Victor also felt the weight of responsibility. He didn't want Astrid to feel like a burden, but he knew he needed to show her that his support was genuine. After they had stored everything away, Victor led her to the abandoned shop where he kept the flowers for Ingrid. With a slow, deliberate gesture, he took a small key from his pocket and extended it to Astrid. She looked at him, confused, not understanding what he intended. Victor gave a slight smile, his eyes filled with what seemed to be hope. "This store went bankrupt before my wife passed away. We managed to keep the key, but we don't know what happened to the store's owners. Since then, it has been abandoned. She always wanted to turn it into a cafe, a place where people could come, rest, and share stories." Astrid took the key, still stunned, running her fingers over the cold metal as if trying to comprehend the meaning of this gesture. Victor took a deep breath and continued. "I would like to open the cafe with you. Of course, if you're willing. Ingrid had this dream, and I believe that in some way she would be happy to see this place filled with life again. And you seem to understand the value of a home even if you've never had one." She remained silent for a moment, absorbing each word. Finally, with a quiet and emotional voice, Astrid revealed a truth she had long kept hidden. "I've always wanted a place to call my own, a home, where people would see me as part of something, not as a stranger." Upon hearing this, Victor felt a pang in his heart. For the first time, he saw in her not just a scared young woman, but a woman full of dreams that had been suffocated by the hardships of life. The silence between them was deep and meaningful, each reflecting on their own losses and longings. In that moment, the cafe project was not just a wish of Victor's late wife, but a shared mission, something that could heal both of them. Astrid finally lifted her gaze, and Victor noted a newfound determination in her eyes. "I want to do this," she said with unexpected resolve. "For you, for Ingrid, and for myself." He nodded, and for the first time in many years, Victor felt that a new chapter was about to begin. The decision to open the cafe was bold, but it represented much more than just an attempt to start a business. For Victor and Astrid, it meant a path to redemption and a renewed purpose. However, the port of Bergen was not always a welcoming place for new ventures. Would they be able to transform the shop into a space that honored Ingrid's dream and gave Astrid the home she so desired? And most importantly, were they ready to face the challenges that this journey would bring? Morning arrived with a gray sky, and the cold spread through every corner of the port. Victor and Astrid opened the door of the old shop and took a deep breath. The shop, covered in dust and smelling of mildew, seemed trapped in time. Every inch of the place carried the memory of a dream unfulfilled. As they cleaned the shelves and removed old boxes stacked in the corner, Astrid watched closely how Victor regarded the space, as if it were hallowed ground. In a moment, as she pulled a crate from the back of the store, Astrid discovered a black and white photograph carefully folded at the bottom of a drawer. In it was a smiling woman with long hair tied back simply, standing exactly where Astrid was now, in front of the shop. Holding the photo, she looked at Victor, hesitating. He approached, and upon seeing the image, he stopped, his expression hardening. It was Ingrid. Victor took the photo with trembling hands, and his eyes filled with deep melancholy. Astrid had never seen him so vulnerable, as if that simple piece of paper had the power to reopen old wounds. "Ingrid loved this place," he began, his voice muffled by emotion. "She always dreamed of opening a cafe, a place where people from the port could find refuge from the cold and solitude." Victor sighed, looking back at the empty space of the shop. "She was the light of my life. This was our dream, but I never managed to realize it alone." Astrid fell silent, absorbing every word with an almost reverent attention. The idea of someone dreaming of bringing life to that place, of turning it into a refuge for those in need, resonated within her. It was as if Ingrid's dream had crossed time, finding, by some caprice of fate, someone who could carry it forward. And for a moment Astrid felt engulfed by a sense of purpose. She approached Victor, placing a hand on his shoulder. Maybe we can do this for her, Victor. Together. Bring back the life that Ingrid so wanted to see here." Victor's gaze met Astrid's, and in that moment he saw a sincere determination in the young woman. With a slight nod, he clasped her hand for a moment, a gesture of gratitude and relief. He knew that, at last, Ingrid's dream was in careful hands. News of Victor and Astrid's cafe quickly spread throughout the port. Each day, as they worked on the store's renovation, curious onlookers passed by, peering in with judgmental glances or whispering among themselves. Some supported the idea, appreciating the initiative to turn the place into a welcoming space, while others turned up their noses, questioning Astrid's presence. To some of the locals, she was still a stranger, an outsider who did not belong in that part of the city. One afternoon, while they were painting the walls and organizing the shelves, a woman entered the shop. It was Marta, a well-known trader at the Bergen market, owner of a local goods store. With a serious face and crossed arms, she observed Astrid with a disapproving expression. "So you're really going through with this?" she asked, her tone icy. Astrid hesitated, feeling the weight of Marta's judgment in her gaze. Before she could respond, Victor intervened. "Astrid is here for a reason. We're doing this together for Ingrid, and I couldn't ask for a better partner." His voice was firm yet calm, a declaration of trust that Astrid never expected to hear. Upon hearing Ingrid's name, Marta seemed to hesitate for a moment, but her expression quickly returned to impassivity. "I just hope you know what you're doing. Changing things around here isn't that simple," Marta said, casting one last critical glance at Astrid before leaving. Marta's words echoed through the shop, leaving a trail of tension in the air. Astrid felt a mix of anger and insecurity. She questioned whether she was truly doing the right thing, whether she was capable of helping Victor fulfill this dream. Sensing her dismay, Victor approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let those looks distract you," he said, his voice steady. "Ingrid also faced resistance when she arrived here. It took years for people to accept her. You don't have to prove anything to them, Astrid. Just to yourself." Victor's words were an unexpected comfort. Astrid took a deep breath, resolved to move forward, regardless of the challenges. For her, that cafe was more than just a place. It was a chance to belong. Days later, as Astrid swept the shop floor at the end of the afternoon, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Helga, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. Astrid recognized her from the market fairs, where she sold local flowers and plants, but they had never spoken. Helga entered slowly, looking around, absorbing the changes being made. She stopped in front of Astrid and took something from her coat pocket. A silver necklace, shaped like a leaf, glimmering in the dim light of the shop. "This necklace belonged to Ingrid," Helga began, her voice trembling. "She wore it all the time, but one day she told me that if her cafe ever opened, she wanted someone special to keep it." Astrid felt the weight of the moment, and as she took the necklace, her hands trembled slightly. The cold touch of the metal seemed to contain a fragment of Ingrid's love for that place, as if her spirit were there, watching and guiding. Helga continued with a gentle gaze. Victor and Ingrid meant a lot to the community, and Ingrid especially always cared about taking care of others, about leaving something of value behind. "I see that Victor has found in you someone he can trust. Take this as a symbol, that you are on the right path." The old woman placed a firm hand on Astrid's shoulder, as if passing on the trust she once had in Ingrid. Astrid couldn't hold back her tears. That small gesture represented a silent yet profound acceptance. It was as if the place was finally acknowledging her, not just as Victor's assistant, but as someone who could continue Ingrid's legacy. Holding the necklace, she looked at Victor, who watched the scene with misty eyes, touched by Helga's gesture. In that moment, Astrid knew her connection to that cafe went beyond mere work. She was there to build something greater, to turn a dream into reality, and in doing so, give herself a new chance. Victor, seeing the determination on Astrid's face, felt that Ingrid would approve. More than a store, that cafe had now become a shared mission, where both of them could transform their losses into something that would illuminate the lives of others. The acceptance Astrid felt in that moment was profound, but the path ahead was uncertain. The resistance from some locals and the emotional obstacles that she and Victor faced still represented barriers. But the cafe was taking shape, and with each passing day, more pieces of Ingrid's dream were falling into place. However, with rising pressure and tensions in the port, would Astrid and Victor be able to overcome the criticism and transform the place into a refuge for all? The morning was quiet, and Astrid, still sleepy, walked toward the cafe under renovation, immersed in the satisfaction of seeing Victor and Ingrid's dream taking shape. However, upon arriving, she noticed a yellowed white envelope stuck to the door, with her name and Victor's written in formal letters. A bad feeling in her stomach hit her immediately, a sudden and cold tension. She opened the envelope and began to read, her eyes widening as she grasped the contents. An eviction notice. Victor arrived a few minutes later, and Astrid, pale, showed him the letter. He read it, each word seeming to increase the weight on his shoulders. The small print and impersonal tone of the notice indicated that the building was included in a new urban redevelopment plan for the port. The owner, a local businessman named Sigurd Odegaard, planned to demolish the area to build a large shopping center. This would mean the end of the cafe, Victor murmured, unable to disguise the note of despair in his voice. Astrid watched Victor's face crumble as if he were losing everything again. His eyes, once lit with the prospect of resurrecting his wife's dream, now reflected silent defeat. For him, it felt as though the effort of the past months had been in vain. Victor took a deep breath, gripping the envelope tightly, but instead of tearing it up, he simply closed his eyes, lost in his own pain. Astrid felt a growing anger, an injustice she couldn't accept. "We can't let this happen, Victor," she said in a firm tone that surprised even herself. "This cafe is more than bricks and walls. It's your dream. It's Ingrid's legacy. And now, it's our fight." Victor looked at her, surprised by the determination emerging in the young woman. Astrid was ready to fight, willing to face any obstacle that arose to protect what the cafe represented for both of them. Without wasting time, Victor and Astrid decided to find Sigurd Odegaard at his company's headquarters, located in one of the more modern areas of Bergen. The imposing glass and steel building contrasted sharply with the simplicity of the cafe and seemed to intimidate them at first glance. Victor adjusted his coat, feeling out of place, but the anger over losing what he loved propelled him to continue. Beside him, Astrid clenched her fists, prepared to defend the space she had come to call home. After a brief wait, they were received in Sigurd's office, a tall man with a rigid posture who greeted them with a cynical smile. He didn't offer them a place to sit, standing behind his desk with his hands firmly resting on the wooden surface. "Mr. Victor, Miss Astrid, I don't have much time, so please be brief," he said directly, his tone indicating impatience. Victor took a deep breath and began to explain in a controlled voice how much the cafe meant to him and to Ingrid, and how it had become an important spot for the small community. He tried to appeal to Sigurd's humanity, sharing the story of Ingrid and the dream he was fighting to fulfill. Astrid watched him, surprised by the vulnerability he allowed to show, his voice trembling with emotion. However, Sigurd listened without changing his expression, his gaze remaining cold and impassive. "I understand you have a sentimental attachment to this place, Mr. Victor," he replied dryly, "but business is business. The port needs to grow, and the redevelopment is inevitable. Your cafe? Well, it's insignificant in this plan." He spoke these words with a calculated coldness, as if he were dealing with numbers on a spreadsheet, not with the dream of a lifetime. Astrid, already boiling over, couldn't hold back. "Insignificant? This cafe is more than just a building. It's a part of this city's history, of the community," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. "You want to demolish a place that represents the lives of real people. You can't measure that in money." Sigurd gave a slight smile, as if he were dealing with a naive child. "I suggest you look for another place for your emotions and stories. This city doesn't stop for nostalgia." With that final statement, he gestured for them to leave, making it clear that there would be no negotiation. Victor felt a deep pain, a frustration that seemed to grow with every step they took out of the office. Hope seemed cruelly and definitively crushed. Back at the cafe, Victor and Astrid sat in silence, absorbing the devastating blow. The cold of the night seeped through the window, and both remained quiet, feeling the weight of defeat. Victor, downcast, fiddled with the old objects in the store, trying to process the idea that soon that place might no longer exist. For him, it was like losing Ingrid a second time, a blow that left him feeling unmoored. As he rummaged through the drawers of one of the shelves, his fingers brushed against something rough, hidden under a pile of papers. He pulled out the object, and upon seeing what it was, felt his heart race. It was a letter, a yellowed piece of paper, with Ingrid's unmistakable handwriting. The words were slightly faded but still legible. Victor swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on his wife's writing, as if she had left him a secret message to find. Astrid, noticing Victor's expression, approached silently, respecting the moment. Victor began to read aloud in a low voice, Ingrid's words echoing through the room like a final declaration of love and hope. "Dear Victor," it began, his voice trembling, "if one day I'm no longer here, I know you will find someone who understands our dream. This cafe is to bring people together, so they have a place where they can feel at home, where they can share their lives." Victor's eyes filled with tears, and Astrid watched him, her heart aching. She finally understood what that place truly meant to him. It was more than a tribute. It was a reflection of love, a promise he couldn't abandon. As he finished reading, Victor looked at Astrid, determination rekindling in his eyes. "I can't let this happen, Astrid. Ingrid wanted this place to mean something, and I will fight for it." Astrid, inspired by Ingrid's words and Victor's strength, nodded firmly. She felt that their struggle wasn't just to preserve a physical space, but to honor Ingrid's memory and everything she represented. "We're not alone, Victor. We'll rally the community. They need to know what this cafe really means." Victor nodded, feeling that Ingrid was still with them, urging them to move forward. That very night, the two began to plan a mobilization. The cafe would become the focal point of resistance against Sigurd's project, a place where everyone could gather to protect a space that represented their stories and their unity. It was the beginning of a new fight, and as difficult as it would be, Victor and Astrid felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. With the discovery of Ingrid's letter, the cafe gained a new significance, and Victor and Astrid's determination was unshakable. But the struggle was just beginning. Would they be able to gather enough support to confront a powerful businessman and save the cafe? The next morning, Victor and Astrid woke up with a renewed purpose. With Ingrid's letter in hand, they decided that the fight for the cafe would be public, something that would involve the community of Bergen and bring collective strength to the battle they faced. Determined, Astrid wrote an open letter explaining the historical and emotional value of the cafe, Ingrid's legacy, and the importance of keeping the space as a symbol of unity and support for everyone. The letter was posted on the cafe's door, quickly catching the attention of passers-by. Throughout the day, curious neighbors and locals began to stop, read the letter, and exchange glances. An elderly man, known only as Arne, approached and noticed Victor's tired face. Arne had been a fisherman for over 40 years and knew the history of the harbor well. With a sigh, he placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. "I remember Ingrid, Victor," Arne said, his voice thick with emotion. "She always brought light to this place. I would see her walking around, smiling and greeting everyone. She doesn't deserve for her dream to be destroyed." These words sparked a wave of support that Victor and Astrid had not anticipated. Other locals began to gather around them. People who remembered Ingrid, who had stories or connections to the cafe, started sharing their own tales. Astrid watched in amazement as suddenly the small shop had become the center of something much larger, connecting lives and memories. Even those who were initially resistant to accepting Astrid began to open up. Hilda, a flower seller from the market, brought a bouquet of wildflowers and left it at the cafe's door as a tribute to Ingrid. "She helped me once, a long time ago," Hilda confessed with a sad smile. "She was always generous, and I know she would support this." Astrid, moved, expressed her gratitude, feeling the strength of every small gesture. The campaign to save the cafe was growing, and the unity of so many people brought a renewed hope to Victor and Astrid. That evening, while they were preparing the shop for the next day, someone unexpected showed up. It was Leif, an old friend of Victor's, who had initially disapproved of Astrid. Leif had been close to Victor in the past, but with Astrid's arrival, he seemed to feel that the young woman was interfering with the memory of Ingrid and the old bonds they shared. Now, however, he was there with an expression that mixed regret and respect. Leif approached, scratching the back of his neck, unsure how to begin. "Victor, I shouldn't have been so rude," he said, his tone sounding sincere. "I didn't understand what you were trying to do here. But now I see that the cafe isn't just a memory, it's something alive, something that's uniting all of us." Victor felt a wave of relief. Leif's presence meant more than he would admit. For many years, Leif had been an important figure in his life, someone he considered almost like a brother. Astrid watched the scene in silence, moved as she realized the significance of that moment of reconciliation. Leif looked at Astrid, and with a slight nod said, "You're part of this now. I see that. Thank you for taking care of it." Leif's words surprised Astrid. She had never imagined that someone who had rejected her at first would change his stance so openly. For the first time, she truly felt like part of a community, a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Victor, on his part, felt strengthened by Astrid's acceptance by the community and by the support of his old friend. The unity of the residents was a silent victory, a force that, however simple, made it clear that they were not alone in this fight. However, the joy was short-lived. The next day, Victor discovered something that cast a new shadow over the fight for the cafe. While investigating the eviction documents, Victor noticed a detail about Sigurd Odegaard that made him shudder. Sigurd was not just an ambitious businessman, he was the son of Hans Odegaard, an old rival of Victor's at the harbor. Hans had been known for his intense and bitter rivalry with Victor, always looking for ways to outdo or undermine his success. Hans and Victor had competed for everything, the best fishing spots, the best prices, and in the end, even for the favor of the local residents. The resentment between the two had become the stuff of rumors among the fishermen and shopkeepers at the harbor. When Ingrid arrived at the harbor and Victor married her, the rift between him and Hans grew even wider. Although Hans had left the scene years ago, the rivalry seemed to have been inherited by his son, who was now using the power of the family business to threaten Victor's dream. When Victor shared this discovery with Astrid, he felt an even greater weight on his shoulders. Now, the fight for the cafe was not only a struggle for justice or memories, it was also a matter of honor, a dispute that spanned generations and carried the wounds of the past. Victor looked at Astrid, the determination on his face, and she realized that this battle had become even more personal for him. "I thought the past was behind me, but it seems the Odegaards don't forget," he said, his voice heavy. "Hans always saw me as a threat, but I never wanted that. Now his son wants to destroy everything that Ingrid and I dreamed of." Astrid squeezed Victor's hand, feeling the weight of his anger and frustration. "Victor, we will win. This cafe doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to all of us now." The silence between them was filled with promise and determination. Astrid knew that not only the cafe was at stake, but also Victor and Ingrid's legacy of love and Victor's right to the peace he had long sought. Holding Astrid's hand, Victor felt a new strength growing within him. The unity of so many friends, the gestures of solidarity, and Ingrid's story were powerful fuels. Looking out at the harbor's horizon, he knew he couldn't give up. If this battle led him back to old ghosts, then he was ready to face them. The fight for the cafe was more intense than ever, but now Victor and Astrid had the community of Bergen by their side. However, the revelation about Sigurd Odegaard brought a new kind of threat, one that was deeper and more personal. Could they, along with the locals, overcome a past filled with rivalries and finally restore Ingrid's dream?
Thank you for watching this far. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people who love these touching stories. Let's dive back into the story.
Astrid was beginning to settle into the rhythm of the cafe and the routine at the port of Bergen when, one afternoon, an unexpected letter arrived. She left the envelope on the small wooden table next to the coffee maker without opening it right away. At that time, any correspondence was rare and almost always associated with some unsettling news. By the end of the day, when the cafe was empty and the lights were merely soft points illuminating the renovated space, she sat down and opened the envelope feeling the weight of a new possibility before even reading the first lines. It was a job offer from a cafe in Oslo, a position as store manager that would not only guarantee financial stability, but also the possibility of a fresh start away from all the hardships she had faced since arriving in Bergen. Oslo meant a chance to have a new life, free from suspicious glances and the relentless struggle against businessman Sigurd Odegaard. The big city offered anonymity, security, and for the first time in a long while, Astrid could see a clear future ahead, far removed from conflict and disapproval. However, as she lifted her gaze and took in the small cafe around her, every detail, from the old counter to the photos they had found and hung on the walls, she felt a knot in her chest. This place had become the center of her life in recent months. Alongside Victor, she had found something akin to family, a bond she never imagined she would experience again. And there lay the dilemma: to move forward, seize a promising opportunity in Oslo, or stay and continue fighting for a dream that was now hers as well. Astrid knew that her decision would deeply impact Victor. He had become almost a father figure to her, someone who believed in her potential when she couldn't see it herself. The thought of leaving him and abandoning everything they had fought for was almost inconceivable. But the offer, with its promise of security and stability, remained irresistible. That night she barely slept, tossing and turning, her mind split between the chance for a new life and the bond she had built with the cafe and with Victor. The next morning, bright and early, Astrid found Victor in the cafe, meticulously setting the tables with a care that revealed how much that space meant to him. She knew she needed to talk to him about the job offer, but felt a hesitation she had never experienced before. Victor, noticing her distant and anxious expression, paused what he was doing and approached her, sensing the concern etched on her face. Astrid took a deep breath and told him about the letter. Victor listened in silence, his hands crossed and his expression serious. She explained the job opportunity and how it would be a chance to rebuild her life in Oslo, but at the same time admitted that the thought of leaving him and abandoning the cafe tightened her heart. Victor did not respond immediately. He simply observed Astrid, as if weighing the impact of her words. Finally, he broke the silence. "Astrid, don't feel obligated to stay because of me," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "You deserve a better life, a chance to stabilize and be happy. I never wanted you to feel you had to be here." Victor tried to sound strong and encouraging, but Astrid could see the pain in his eyes. He wanted her to have a safe and free life, but he also knew that her departure would leave a void that would be hard to fill. Those words stirred an emotion Astrid tried to suppress. The cafe was the place where she had found a reason to keep going, and Victor was the only person who had given her a vote of confidence. In that moment, she realized he was willing to let her go for her own better future, and that only reinforced how much he truly cared for her. With tears welling in her eyes, Astrid touched Victor's shoulder. "I don't know if I can just leave, Victor. Here, with you, I've found something I don't want to lose. This cafe is more than a job, it's a home." Victor nodded, smiling faintly, and in that moment, they both understood how much they had built together. Something that went beyond the walls of the cafe or Ingrid's legacy. It was a connection that, even if they separated, could never truly be broken. Shortly after her conversation with Victor, Astrid still felt torn, but as she walked through the port toward the market, she overheard fragments of a conversation between two merchants. Their words spoke of Sigurd Odegaard's new project, described with sarcasm and disapproval. "He wants to open a cafe in the same spot, a thing called Café Odegaard," one of the men commented. "He thinks he can turn Victor and Ingrid's old dream into his own profit." Astrid's blood boiled. Odegaard planned to destroy the cafe just to erect a convenient and profitable imitation, using the space that should have been preserved. This was more than an attack on Victor's dream. It was a calculated betrayal, a blatant theft of Ingrid's legacy. Anger surged within her, mixed with an unwavering determination. She could not and would not let this happen. With quick steps and a racing heart, Astrid returned to the cafe and found Victor in the midst of his tasks. Still consumed by outrage, she told him what she had overheard, her words laden with intense and uncontrollable emotion. "He wants to replace our cafe, Victor! An identical cafe, but with his name, taking advantage of everything we've built!" The words spilled out like a flood of emotions. Victor fell silent for a few moments, absorbing the blow of that revelation. Seeing the pain and determination in Astrid's eyes, he felt he was not alone in this fight. The cafe represented so much more than just a building, and now they were certain they needed to confront Sigurd with all their strength. "I'm not going to give up this place, Astrid. Not after everything we've been through," Victor declared with a firmness she had never seen before. Upon hearing those words, Astrid knew she couldn't abandon him, nor could she give up on the cafe. Oslo now seemed distant, an empty opportunity compared to what she could achieve alongside Victor. This was her home, the place where she had built something real, and she would not allow a man driven by selfish interest to destroy it. By the end of that afternoon, Victor and Astrid talked for hours, devising strategies to save the cafe and prevent Sigurd from turning the place into a corrupt version of an authentic dream. They knew the battle would be tough and that they would face new challenges, but they were ready to fight. And so, with Astrid's decision to stay and Victor's renewed determination, both were prepared to face whatever came their way, for they understood that the value of that cafe went far beyond profit or physical space. It was, above all, a symbol of a love that would never die and a home that welcomed lost souls. Astrid and Victor were more determined than ever, united by the bond they had built and the promise to protect the cafe. But they knew Sigurd would not back down easily, and that he would likely use every resource at his disposal to win. Would they be able to save Ingrid's legacy and prevent the cafe from becoming just a faded memory? In the days following Astrid's decision to stay, she and Victor threw themselves into preparations for a big event that would involve the entire community. The idea of hosting a fair in front of the cafe emerged as a way to unite the neighborhood around the history and purpose of that place. They both knew they needed more than support. They needed tangible proof that the cafe meant something greater to everyone around them. Victor worked quietly but with a new intensity. Astrid, watching him, knew he carried more than the weight of the cafe. He carried Ingrid's dream, and that fair was their last chance to save it. On the morning of the fair, the Bergen harbor felt different, almost festive, despite the heavy clouds promising rain. In front of the cafe, Stalls of homemade foods, flowers, and local crafts filled the space, attracting people of all ages. The delicious scent of cinnamon and spices wafted through the air, and the cheerful sound of conversation surrounded them. Astrid, with her heart racing, looked around, enchanted by the support that was starting to materialize. Victor stood beside her, and his eyes lit up as he saw the number of people arriving. One by one, local residents approached him, shaking his hand, offering words of encouragement, and reminiscing about moments spent with Ingrid. Each story felt like a breath of life, each face a reminder of her kindness and the impact she had left behind. Astrid watched, moved, as those stories about Ingrid reinforced the significance of that place. For the first time, Victor felt he wasn't alone. The community was truly by his side. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. It was Leif, the longtime friend who had initially disapproved of Astrid, but who now approached with an emotional smile. "It's good to see this, Victor," Leif said, his eyes shining. Ingrid would be proud. She knew better than anyone what it meant to turn a common place into a home. Victor nodded, feeling the weight of his wife's invisible presence, as if she were there, watching everything and approving of the battle he and Astrid had fought. At the height of the fair, Astrid gathered her courage and, holding a piece of paper with trembling hands, stepped up onto a small makeshift platform to capture the crowd's attention. She held Ingrid's letter, the document that marked a turning point in their struggle. Looking at Victor, who encouraged her with a nod, she began to read, her voice filled with emotion, silencing the people around her. "Dear Victor, I know that our dream of opening a cafe to welcome people may seem small, but I believe it can make a difference," Astrid read, her voice echoing over the murmurs of the crowd. "This cafe is for those who need a home, even if temporary. For those seeking warmth on cold days, and for those, like us, who need to feel part of something greater." Ingrid's words were profound, and Astrid struggled to control her voice, which trembled at times, feeling connected to every sentiment described in them. As she continued reading, the crowd fell silent, absorbing the weight of each word. For many, those phrases carried a truth that went beyond the words, evoking memories and feelings that seemed to have been forgotten. Astrid watched as tears streamed down some faces, including Victor's. Ingrid's words had the power to touch deeply, and it felt as though she were there, speaking to each one of them. At the end of the reading, Astrid closed the letter and, taking a deep breath, looked at the attendees. "This place is not just a cafe. It's a dream that refuses to die," she said, her conviction making her voice strong. Victor stepped closer, placing his hand on her shoulder in a silent gesture of support and gratitude. For him, witnessing the impact Ingrid's words still had was like receiving a hug from his beloved. He knew that somehow she was guiding them. The community's support seemed to strengthen from that moment on. People applauded, and even the most skeptical were touched by the reading of the letter. The event had become more than just a fair. It was a celebration of Ingrid's memory and a demonstration of support for Victor and Astrid, a silent commitment to keep the cafe alive. Victor felt that this unity was the greatest proof that his struggle was worth it. Amid the fair's enthusiasm, a murmur spread through the crowd. People began to look toward the other side of the square, where a tall, distinguished figure was approaching. Sigurd Odegaard, the businessman who threatened the cafe. His presence was met with looks of surprise and disapproval. Victor and Astrid exchanged apprehensive glances, unsure of what to expect from this unexpected visit. Sigurd walked with a confident posture, but there was a contemplative expression on his face. He stopped in front of Victor and Astrid, and all eyes turned to him. Victor stood firm, maintaining eye contact. Sigurd cleared his throat as if searching for the right words, and finally spoke in a tone different from his usual one. "I confess I underestimated the value of this place," he began, shifting his gaze between Victor and the crowd around them. "I didn't imagine this cafe had so much importance to so many people." Silence enveloped the area. Sigurd seemed taken aback by the impact of the letter and the mobilization he had witnessed. He took a deep breath and continued. "Maybe I have been insensitive, and for that, I am here to propose something." Victor's and Astrid's gazes intensified, and the tension in the air was palpable. "Instead of demolishing this place, I propose transforming it into a tourist attraction for the city, preserving the cafe and ensuring its authenticity." Astrid and Victor exchanged glances, almost in disbelief at what they were hearing. It was a proposal they had never expected, a twist that could completely change the course of the battle they had been fighting. Sigurd continued, now seeming more at ease. "This cafe could be more than just a local spot. It could attract visitors and maintain the essence you both defend. I guarantee we will keep the name and honor Ingrid's legacy." Victor moved, nodded slowly, feeling as if he were living a dream. Astrid squeezed his hand, her face reflecting the same surprise and gratitude. Everyone around seemed to understand the magnitude of what was happening. Sigurd had recognized the cafe's value and, even more, was willing to ensure it became a symbol of unity and history for the entire city. Applause erupted, and people began to surround Victor and Astrid, congratulating them on their victory. Victor, with tear-filled eyes, looked up at the sky as if sharing that moment with Ingrid. She, in spirit, had been part of every step and was undoubtedly present in Sigurd's decision. Astrid, by his side, embraced him, feeling more connected than ever to the cafe and Ingrid's legacy. With the community's support and Sigurd's unexpected proposal, the cafe's future finally seemed secure. However, the transformation into a tourist spot brought new challenges and possibilities. Would Victor and Astrid be able to maintain the cafe's essence in the face of the changes ahead? It was a bright morning in Bergen, and the cafe was alive with energy, filled with locals, friends, and curious visitors who had heard the cafe's story. The atmosphere was renewed and vibrant, as if the cafe was the heart of the community, pulsing with each step and smile of those who entered. Astrid and Victor could hardly believe everything that was happening. What once seemed impossible was now a reality brimming with joy and warmth. Victor stood near the entrance, taking in every detail and absorbing the feeling of completeness that the place now radiated. He saw Ingrid in every corner, in each detail of the decor they had worked so hard to preserve. The happiness on his face was unmistakable. He finally felt that the cafe had fulfilled Ingrid's dream of being a welcoming space for everyone to come together. Beside him, Astrid served cakes, coffees, and teas to the visitors, her smile revealing just how much she felt at home there. Suddenly, Leif, Victor's longtime friend, arrived and pulled him into an emotional embrace. "You did it, my friend. The cafe is exactly what Ingrid would have wanted," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Victor nodded, feeling the pride and affection in Leif's words. As he looked around, he saw each person present as proof that Ingrid continued to live on in the hearts of all who knew the cafe. He felt complete and at peace, as if all his struggles had been worth it. Astrid, while serving everyone, also sensed that this was no ordinary day. It was the culmination of a dream she never imagined having, a true home and a new family alongside Victor and the community of Bergen. The cafe, for her, was more than just a workplace. It was where she had found and rediscovered hope. By late morning, as visitors explored the cafe and enjoyed the celebration, Victor revealed a small gesture of homage to Ingrid. Next to the main counter, he had hung a photo of her, her warm smile shining brightly. Around the photo, he arranged a small display of items representing Ingrid's memories and the cafe. A teacup she used daily, a notebook where she jotted down recipes, and even dried flowers reminiscent of those Victor placed at the cafe's door every day. Astrid helped organize the tribute, feeling emotional as she watched Victor carefully arrange every detail. To her, each object was a piece of Ingrid's story, a story that was now part of her own life. As visitors passed by the display, some gently touched Ingrid's photo, while others shared little memories and stories they cherished about her. Ingrid's presence felt even stronger in that space. Victor became teary-eyed, seeing how everyone remembered her with love and respect. Leif, observing the scene, placed a hand on Victor's shoulder and said, "She would be proud of you, Victor, and very grateful to Astrid for taking such good care of everything." Hearing that, Victor looked at Astrid, who stood beside him, and smiled. They didn't need to exchange words. Both understood they had built something that went far beyond a cafe. By the end of the day, when the hustle and bustle had quieted and the cafe was once again serene, a couple approached Victor and Astrid. Nora, an editor from a prominent publishing company in Bergen, introduced herself with an excited smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but my husband and I have been here for the entire event. The story of this cafe is incredible, and what you both have done to keep Ingrid's dream alive is truly inspiring," Nora said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Astrid and Victor exchanged puzzled glances, but Nora continued, now in a more serious tone. "I have a proposal for you. How about sharing this story with the world? I believe there's so much to learn from your journey and what this place represents for the community." Victor blinked, surprised, unsure how to respond. The idea of turning the cafe's story into a book felt both enticing and surreal. He looked at Astrid, who was smiling, excited about the possibility of immortalizing their journey. "You have a story of struggle, love, and persistence that deserves to be told," Nora insisted. "The world needs to hear how a simple cafe became a symbol of unity and resilience." Victor took a deep breath, trying to grasp the magnitude of that proposal. To him, the cafe was a personal memory, but seeing the sparkle in Astrid's eyes and the enthusiasm of the visitors, he began to realize that perhaps sharing this story was more than just an opportunity. It was a way to honor Ingrid's legacy and the value of everything they had built together. After a moment of reflection, Victor extended his hand to Nora and said with a firm but emotional voice, "Yes, let's tell this story. Ingrid deserves this, and I couldn't have done any of this without Astrid." Hearing Victor's words, Astrid smiled, holding his hand tightly. That cafe, which was home to both of them and to everyone who passed through, would now have the chance to touch lives far beyond Bergen. As the sun began to set, Victor and Astrid realized that the cafe was not just a physical place. It was a symbol of overcoming challenges and hope. The book that would share their story would be more than a tribute to Ingrid. It would be a message that with determination and unity, any dream could become a reality. They knew new challenges might arise, but they were ready to face them, for now they had the support of a community and Ingrid's memory guiding them. With the cafe strengthened and the proposal to publish a book about their journey, Ingrid's legacy would reach the world. But what new doors might this journey open for Astrid and Victor? It was a calm morning in Bergen, and the harbor was shrouded in a thin layer of mist that softened the landscape, as if time itself had stopped. Victor, dressed in his old worn coat, walked alongside Astrid toward the cafe. They hadn't exchanged many words that morning, as both seemed absorbed in the thoughts that the place now evoked. As they reached the cafe entrance, Victor paused for a moment, holding a flower he had carefully chosen that very morning. He looked at Astrid with a subtle smile, an expression of gratitude that conveyed everything words could not. Victor bent down and placed the flower at the cafe's entrance, in the same spot where, months earlier, he had left the first flower for Ingrid. This ritual, once a solitary solace, had now become a tribute to the legacy that Astrid had helped him build. Astrid watched in silence, respecting the depth of the moment. She understood what that flower represented for Victor, a cycle that had begun with Ingrid and was now gaining new colors and meanings alongside her and everyone who had helped maintain the cafe. For Victor, it was a tribute to the wife who had inspired him to create that space. But it was also a symbol of the future, a future in which Ingrid would live on in every memory, in every smile of those who crossed the cafe's threshold. Victor slowly rose and looked at Astrid, a light shining in his eyes. "You know, Astrid," he said, his voice trembling, "when I started leaving flowers for Ingrid, I thought I was doing it for her. But now I realize I was doing it for myself, too, to remind me of what she dreamed for this place." He looked around, admiring the bustle of people coming and going from the cafe, some sharing laughter and others enjoying the silence. It felt as if Ingrid's spirit was still there among them, and Astrid was now an essential part of that presence. After a few moments of silence, Victor took another flower, one he had saved especially for Astrid. He extended his hand, and Astrid took it, a little surprised but touched by the gesture. The flower was similar to the one he used to leave for Ingrid, simple, yet chosen with care. "Astrid, I want you to have this flower. It represents everything you've brought into my life and into this cafe." Astrid looked at him, feeling the symbolic weight of that moment. She held the flower gently, realizing that, in a way, that gesture was the link between Ingrid and her, between Victor's past and the future they were now building together. For Astrid, the flower was more than a gift. It was a symbol of welcome, belonging, and renewal. Throughout her life, she had rarely felt such a deep connection with anyone, and with that simple gesture, Victor made her feel part of something bigger than she could imagine. "Thank you, Victor," she said with a genuine smile. "This place has changed my life. I never imagined I could have a new chance, but you gave me that. And I promise to take care of this cafe just as you and Ingrid always dreamed." Victor nodded, moved by her words, feeling that the cycle of kindness and love that had begun with Ingrid was now complete. The two stood side by side, watching the activity around them. For Victor, the cafe was not just a physical space, it was a living heritage. He knew that Astrid's journey and the connection they had created made Ingrid's dream even more real. She was there, in the gestures of every person, in Astrid's care, and in the shared smiles of everyone passing through that place. And with the offering of that flower, Victor felt he was finally at peace. As the weeks passed, the cafe transformed into a gathering spot where locals and tourists came not only to savor coffee and desserts, but also to hear the stories and accounts about the place. Each visitor, upon crossing the threshold, sensed the unique atmosphere the cafe provided. It was a refuge of calm and warmth, a space where new friendships formed and stories were shared. Astrid, with her welcoming demeanor and genuine smile, quickly became a beloved host to everyone. She listened attentively to the visitors' stories, each one adding a layer of meaning to the cafe. For her, the cafe was not just a legacy from Victor and Ingrid, but also a place where she had found her true family. Victor, watching her with pride, saw how Astrid transformed Ingrid's vision into reality, welcoming everyone who entered, just as his wife had always dreamed. Soon, the cafe began to attract local media attention. Journalists and photographers came to document the inspiring story of that small establishment that had endured the test of time and adversity. Victor and Astrid proudly shared about Ingrid and how her dream of creating a welcoming place had overcome so many challenges. The unexpected notoriety turned the cafe into a tourist hotspot in Bergen, but the warm atmosphere remained intact. On a particularly busy day, a couple of tourists stopped to chat with Victor and Astrid, intrigued by the cafe's magical ambiance. "This place is unlike any other we've visited," they said. "It feels special, as if every detail has its own story." Victor smiled and replied, "It's because every person who comes here leaves a bit of themselves behind." Astrid added, "And that's what we want, for everyone to be a part of this story." The cafe had become a true symbol of resilience and unity. Locals and tourists viewed it as a special place where anyone could find a bit of peace and connection. Victor and Astrid, united by a deep and genuine friendship, knew they had created something that would stand the test of time. No matter what the future held, the cafe would continue to be a home for those in need of shelter, a space of renewal, and a living memory. The cafe, now an icon in Bergen, maintained Ingrid's spirit in every corner, and with Astrid and Victor at the helm, her legacy would continue to thrive. They had found there not just a purpose, but a way to perpetuate the love and unity that guided them.
The story of Victor and Astrid is a powerful reminder that even in the hardest times, the support and kindness of another person can light our way. Victor found comfort in opening his heart to Astrid, and she, in turn, discovered a new beginning through the simple yet genuine gesture of a stranger. Amid challenges and losses, both realize that we're never truly alone when we have the courage to open up and trust. Life often tests us, but it's in these small moments of human connection that we find renewed strength and hope. So, what lesson do you take from this story? Is there someone in your life who could benefit from a small act of kindness? Share your thoughts on Victor and Astrid's journey in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. And be sure to watch the next recommended video in the final card. It's another heartwarming story. Thank you for watching till the end, and we hope to see you in the next story.